For a long time, Linux carried a reputation that scared people away before they even tried it. It was seen as complicated, unfriendly, and reserved for programmers, hackers, or people who enjoyed suffering for the sake of control. Windows, on the other hand, was considered the obvious choice for normal users because it just worked. But something has quietly changed, and many people haven't noticed it yet. Linux is no longer the hard, rough, experimental operating system it once was. In fact, Linux is becoming so easy that the traditional gap between Linux and Windows has almost completely disappeared. For the first time in decades, the question is no longer, can normal users use Linux? But rather, why are people still assuming Linux is difficult at all? If you go back 10 or 15 years, installing Linux often meant burning an ISO file, booting into a strange installer, manually partitioning disks, worrying about bootloaders, and praying that your Wi-Fi card was supported. After installation, you might boot into a bare desktop that looked nothing like Windows or Mac OS. And suddenly, you were expected to understand package managers, repositories, terminal commands, and configuration files just to get basic things done. Even simple tasks like installing a printer or a graphics driver could turn into a weekend-long project. Windows felt simple by comparison because it came pre-installed, recognized most hardware automatically, and guided users through everything with familiar menus and wizards. Fast forward to today, and the experience is completely different. Modern Linux distributions are designed with ease of use as a primary goal, not an afterthought. Installation has become almost boringly simple. You download an ISO, flash it to a USB drive using a graphical tool, boot from it, and click Install. The installer asks a few basic questions like language, keyboard layout, time zone, and whether you want to install alongside Windows or replace it. Disk partitioning is automatic by default. Secure boot works out of the box on many systems, and the entire process often takes less time than installing Windows updates. For many users, installing Linux today is actually faster and less stressful than installing Windows from scratch. Once installed, the desktop experience is where the biggest change becomes obvious. Modern Linux desktops look polished, consistent, and familiar. Whether it's Cinnamon, GNOME, KDE Plasma, XFCE, or even custom desktops designed by specific distributions, everything feels intentional and user-focused. You have a start menu, system tray, notifications, settings panels, file managers, and app stores that behave in predictable ways. If someone sits down at Linux Mint, Ubuntu, Zorin OS, Pop! _OS, or Fedora for the first time, they don't feel lost. They immediately understand how to open apps, browse files, connect to Wi-Fi, adjust volume, and shut the system down. That immediate familiarity is something Linux lacked for years, and now it's one of its strongest advantages. Software installation is another area where the old Linux myths have completely collapsed. People still repeat the idea that you have to use the terminal to install anything on Linux, but that hasn't been true for a long time. Most mainstream distributions include a graphical software center that feels very similar to the Microsoft Store or even mobile app stores. You search for an application, click Install, enter your password, and that's it. Updates are handled automatically and centrally, without pop-ups begging you to restart your system every few hours. Even better, Linux app stores often include everything from system updates to drivers and third-party applications in one place, which is something Windows still struggles to do cleanly. Then there's the rise of universal packaging formats like Flatpak, Snap, and AppImage. These formats have quietly solved one of Linux's biggest historical problems: software compatibility across distributions. Today, developers can package their applications once and make them available to users across almost every major Linux system. From a user perspective, this means you no longer have to worry about dependencies, missing libraries, or breaking your system by installing something incorrectly. You just install the app, run it, and it works. This is exactly the kind of simplicity Windows users have always expected, and Linux now delivers it just as well, if not better. Hardware support is another area where Linux has made massive progress. In the past, hardware compatibility was one of the biggest reasons people avoided Linux. Printers didn't work. Wi-Fi adapters required obscure drivers, and graphics performance could be hit or miss. Today, most hardware works automatically the moment you boot into a Linux Live environment. Wi-Fi connects instantly, Bluetooth works without drama, sound is detected correctly, and modern kernels include drivers for an enormous range of devices. Graphics support, especially for AMD and Intel GPUs, is often excellent out of the box. Even NVIDIA, long considered a Linux pain point, has become far easier to manage thanks to improved drivers and better integration with desktop environments. Gaming, once Linux's weakest area, is now one of the most surprising success stories. For years, gaming was the ultimate reason to stick with Windows. If you wanted to play modern games, Windows was non-negotiable. Today, that argument is rapidly losing strength. Thanks to Valve's investment in Linux, Proton, and Steam Deck, thousands of Windows games now run on Linux with little to no effort. Many games work simply by clicking install and pressing play without manual tweaks or configuration. Performance is often comparable to Windows, and in some cases even better. The idea that Linux is only for productivity and servers is outdated. Linux is now a legitimate gaming platform, and for many users, it's good enough that switching no longer feels like a sacrifice. Office work and daily productivity are no longer barriers either. Browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and Edge work identically on Linux. Web-based tools function the same, regardless of operating system. LibreOffice provides strong compatibility with Microsoft Office formats, and many people now rely entirely on cloud-based Office suites anyway. Email clients, messaging apps, video conferencing tools, and media players are all readily available. From the perspective of an average user who browses the web, watches videos, writes documents, and communicates online, Linux feels no different from Windows in daily use. One of the most important shifts, however, is psychological rather than technical. Linux used to demand that users adapt to it. You had to learn its rules, accept its quirks, and invest time into understanding how it worked. Modern Linux flips that relationship around. Today, Linux adapts to the user. If you want a Windows-like experience, you can have it. If you prefer something macOS-like, that's available too. If you want something minimal, flashy, traditional, or experimental, Linux offers all of it without forcing a single approach. This flexibility no longer comes at the cost of usability. Instead, it enhances it. Another reason Linux feels easier than ever is stability. Modern distributions are incredibly reliable. Crashes are rare, updates rarely break systems, and performance remains consistent over time. Many users are surprised to discover that their Linux system feels faster after years of use. While Windows systems often slow down due to background processes, accumulated software, and aggressive telemetry, Linux updates are generally smaller, more transparent, and less disruptive. You don't wake up to find your system rebooted overnight or stuck in a working on updates screen for an hour. Security also plays a role in Linux's ease of use. Linux systems are inherently more secure by design, which means users don't need to rely heavily on third-party antivirus software constantly running in the background. Updates are signed and distributed through trusted repositories, reducing the risk of malware. For the average user, this translates into peace of mind and fewer interruptions. Security exists quietly in the background rather than demanding attention through constant alerts and warnings. Customization is another area where Linux's maturity shines. In the past, customization often meant editing configuration files or installing unstable themes. Today, customization is accessible through graphical tools that anyone can use. You can change themes, icons, layouts, animations, and behaviors with just a few clicks. This makes Linux feel personal and comfortable rather than rigid. Windows has customization options too, but they are often limited or inconsistent. On Linux, customization feels natural and encouraged, not hidden behind registry edits or paid add-ons. It's also important to talk about how Linux handles user control. On Windows, many decisions are made for you. Updates are pushed whether you want them or not. Features are added or removed without your consent. Settings change after major updates. On Linux, the user remains in control. You decide when to update, what to install, and how your system behaves. This control used to be intimidating, but now it's presented in a friendly way. You don't need to use it if you don't want to, but it's there when you do. That balance makes Linux feel empowering rather than overwhelming. Perhaps the most telling sign that the gap with Windows is gone is the growing number of people who switch to Linux and never go back. These aren't developers or system administrators. They're students, writers, designers, gamers, office workers, and everyday users who simply want a reliable computer. Many of them report the same experience. After a short adjustment period, Linux feels easier, cleaner, and less stressful than Windows. They stop worrying about licenses, forced upgrades, or system slowdowns. Their computer becomes a tool again, not a problem to manage. Even learning Linux has become easier. Tutorials, videos, forums, and documentation are more accessible than ever. The community has matured and become more welcoming. Many distributions actively design their documentation for beginners, explaining things clearly instead of assuming prior knowledge. When users do encounter problems, solutions are often just a search away, and the answers are usually straightforward. The fear of breaking something has diminished because modern systems are resilient and forgiving. What makes all of this even more remarkable is that Linux achieved this level of ease without sacrificing its core values. It remains open source, transparent, and community-driven. Users aren't locked into ecosystems or forced to accept unwanted changes. The system respects your choices. That combination of freedom and simplicity is rare in modern computing, and it's one of the reasons Linux feels so refreshing today. The idea that Linux is too easy might sound strange to those who remember its past, but it's a reflection of how far it has come. Ease of use is no longer a weakness or a compromise. It's a strength. Linux no longer asks users to prove themselves or earn their way in. It welcomes them, supports them, and stays out of the way once everything is working. In many ways, it now embodies what people originally loved about personal computers: control, reliability, and simplicity. So when people say the gap between Linux and Windows is gone, they're not exaggerating. In everyday use, the differences are minimal. Both systems can browse the web, run modern applications, play games, and handle work tasks. But Linux increasingly does all of this with fewer interruptions, fewer restrictions, and fewer frustrations. For a growing number of users, that makes Linux not just an alternative to Windows, but a better experience overall. Linux didn't become easier by copying Windows. It became easier by learning from its mistakes, listening to users, and refining its design over time. The result is an operating system that feels mature, confident, and approachable. The learning curve that once defined Linux has flattened dramatically. Today, switching to Linux often feels less like a challenge and more like a relief. And that's the real story here. Linux isn't becoming easy in a shallow or simplified way. It's becoming easy because it has finally aligned powerful technology with thoughtful design. The tools are there when you need them, hidden when you don't. The system works with you instead of against you. The gap with Windows isn't just closing. In many everyday situations, it has already disappeared. For the first time, Linux isn't just ready for everyone. It's inviting everyone in.